are Locked On Texas Tech, your daily podcast on the Texas Tech Red Raiders. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
We're going to start this thing off right. Raider! Everything runs through Lubbock.
Great to be with you again on Locked On Texas Tech on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Always free and available on YouTube or anywhere you get podcasts. This reaction episode with breaking news to react to, brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. That's why LinkedIn Jobs helps find the right people for your team faster and for free. So post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. Terms and conditions apply. That is a just divine coincidence that is who this episode is brought to us by, as we have an open job now here in West Texas. If you have not heard by this point in the day, Stephen Hamby out as the Texas Tech offensive line coach, terminated without cause. Chris Level joining us from Waco, Texas, America. And Chris, I know that as we look back at his couple of seasons here in West Texas as a coach, still a lot left to be desired on the field as far as the offensive line was concerned, but that's certainly not a problem that was the creation of Stephen Hamby. Was a long-running thing that he was trying to correct. So it's hard to know what to attribute this move to, as it relates at all or not at all to on-field performance. And then, of course, you got the timing of this entire thing as we're sitting here early on in the month of February. So a lot to process here, and was wondering how this struck you today.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if the right word is like shocked, but was not expecting this. If it's strictly performance, I mean, you usually make those moves, post, at the end of the season or anything like that. I mean, I think you mentioned the terminated without cause, and I guess his contract had kicked in for the year two, last week, which is, really interesting timing on things. You've got a whole bunch of portal additions. Spring football is about a month away. So, yeah, I mean, I think the timing is really the major glaring, like, whoa, kind of that's what shocked me. I mean, if you make a move, with any of your coaches, in November, December, you're like, okay, well, I get it. Somebody's moving on, or hey, we're going to go in a different direction or whatever. But 1st of February is not, really the timing. So I don't know, man. A couple things. I've known Hamby for 20 plus years. I mean, this is the guy that was blocking for Graham Harrell whenever you were beating Texas, and he did unbelievable things as a player in this program. He was a Red Raider. His wife's a Red Raider. Know her well, Devin, sweet lady. And I thinking about them certainly. But yet, having said that, I trust Joey's leadership. I mean, Joey's special, and if there's something that just they weren't seeing eye to eye, which it sounds like, I mean, obviously that there was something there, then you trust Coach McGuire on what he thinks is best for the here and the now. But yeah, the timing of it was certainly out of left field, and you've got to go find somebody to coach arguably the most important position on your team right now. Because, Calvin, we can talk about keeping Barron healthy. We can talk about how excited we are about Micah Hudson. We can talk about play calling. We could talk about, defensive scheme, whatever, all we want. But if you can't get it done up front on offense, none of the rest of it matters. And I think it's a very valid point that you make earlier, in that the offensive line around here has really struggled from a recruiting or development standpoint for, 5 to 7 years. And they've had some bright spots, and they've had some good players, but I mean, just in general, and it's probably, maybe we were spoiled there for a period of time when you just felt like that you were always so good there, and you're churning out NFL guys. But it's just that's been a problem spot for a variety of reasons for a while, and it's certainly not all. I mean, I don't think the offensive line was great either one of the last 2 years, but it wasn't terrible. And I think they were trying to fix it and throwing assets at it by trying to go get older and portal and trying to recruit well and give some time for those guys to grow up and all that. But I guess now somebody else is going to be in charge of that process.
Yeah, and just personally as a fan, I'd have to go back, I think even much longer than 5 or 7 to feeling like you had a good group. You've had some guys that eventually became professionals that have come through, but it always seemed kind of singular as far as there's one here, maybe 2 there, or even if they were here at the same time, like their best days weren't at Tech. They were somehow in the National Football League, whether it was like a Jack Anderson example, like couldn't stay healthy really all that consistently at Tech, but you knew that he was highly thought of from a professional standpoint, winds up as a professional player. Guys like LaRaven Clark, Adrian Waddle, so on and so forth, Terrence Steele. I kind of look at some of these guys as like one-offs, and then all of a sudden they get to the NFL, and you're like, okay, well, they do have something in the tank, I guess, even though they didn't reach their pinnacle at Texas Tech or on the college level, which is no crime, by the way. Continuing to get better is just fine, and being your best version of yourself as a player in the NFL. There's nothing wrong with that, but it's been a long time since I really felt like there was a group that really played well together. You had some good luck from an injury standpoint to where they could build some chemistry and synergy. I mean, I like go back to maybe a DeAndre Washington era when you had like some back-to-back 1,000-yard years. Of course, some of that was overlapping with Patrick Mahomes, and we know how many times he was in 3rd and 12. So I don't know, was it even great at that point in time? It's been a long time, so I can't just sit here and say, boy, the offensive line is not where you want it to be. So clearly you need to make a change with this position coach. That's not the overwhelming feeling I have in any way, shape, or form. As a matter of fact, it was kind of a strange thing to process leaving this year when you have Taj Brooks with one of the most productive seasons in the history of the program. Yeah. And we talked about like, hey, FBS leader in broken tackles. The dream is next year, break those tackles on the second level of the defense, not behind your own line of scrimmage, which a lot of those were happening, like right at the handoff. So anyway, that's the performance side of it. You can make of that what you will and let us know in the YouTube comments how you feel about that. But the timing, I don't know, am I a fool to believe that there was something, relationship-wise with Hamby and someone? I don't know who it was, but is that like foolish to assume just because of this timing that there had to have been something outside of the lines that brought an end to the relationship, or am I building a bridge too far there?
Well, and I, in things like this, I don't know if we'll ever get the full version of the story, or and it may not even really matter to most. Some will be very curious as to what the reasoning was or the philosophical difference, maybe. Whether it's how they're being coached, whether it's scheme, whether it's I want to be able to recruit these guys. I mean, who the heck knows? There's a variety of different things that fall under what a position coach is asked to do and adhere to at the college level, and everybody sets it up differently. But I just don't know that part. But yeah, I mean, I think something obviously wasn't in agreement with everybody, and so it's just, this is the part of the business that just kind of, to be honest with you, when you get to know people and you like all parties that we're talking about here, it sucks, but this is the nature of the business, and this is exactly why, Cowan, whenever we talk about, when somebody pitches the question, hey, are you expecting any coaching changes? Do you expect anything like that? And I always try to say, it's extremely rare. And here we are again in back-to-back years where pretty much everybody comes back, but there's a change. And Emmett Jones last year replaced by, Coach Johnson. And here we are with Coach Hamby, and I don't know who will replace him, but, it's just very rare that there's not something for whatever reason that a staff but, the reasons why, that's between, I guess, Joey and Hamby, and maybe we'll all have a better feel for that in time. But right now, I'm still kind of in the very surprise, shock. Again, at the timing of everything. That's the part that I'm like, yeah. Whoa, it's kind of a shock to the system a little bit. And I go back to I think Mike was coaching here one year when Jack Bicknell was brought in to coach the offensive line, And I think he went through the entire spring. He was Doug Flutie's center. That was his claim to fame. And Bicknell is here through the whole spring, coaches every practice in spring ball. And it was like in May or something, it's like, hey, he's out. And he's gonna go take another job. And I'm like, holy cow. Because the offensive line spot on a coaching staff, it's a massive deal. There's a lot of responsibility. You typically have more players in your room than any other position on the team. That's the other thing that we should talk about here too, is like, okay, so what now? And my guess is, I think you're going to go try to find somebody that is much more experienced, or has some experience, and maybe an established, but that's going to be costly. And like, if you look at what Hamby was being paid, it probably was on the very, very low end of Power 5 offensive line coaches. I mean, Cowan, he was making just under $350 a year, like closer to $320. And I mean, I think you can go look around now, and there's plenty of like $800 to $1 million offensive line coaches in the Power 5 out there. Not that just because you pay somebody makes them worth that, but that's the going rate for a really good, experienced offensive line coach at the Power 5 level. And so it's a position that, a lot of resources are put into. And so that's going to be the interesting part here, is what you replace Coach Hamby with and what that costs you, because it's not going to be cheap.
Yeah, I know that at RedRaidersports.com, we've already got a quick hot list of just a few names that could be included there. So I encourage folks to check that out if they haven't seen it so far. And it was really a collection kind of all over. Some with a whole lot of experience on their tenure, some maybe a little bit younger. I know one name was Clay McGuire, a guy who had a previous relationship and tenure, obviously, here at Texas Tech. And just kind of asking, I guess, out loud as I'm thinking here, who do I need to contact to announce my candidacy possibly for this offensive line position? Because let me tell you, 160-pound twisted steel sex appeal left guard knows every trick in the book, and that's who you're talking to right here. So I don't know. I'm just throwing that out there as well. But
KCPS Cowan, and the PS stands for pure and sexy.
That's right. I thought you were going to go with PO, pissed off, because that's the way I had to play to get on the field. But it was, and I know this is so early on, none of that's gospel or set in stone, and who knows what it might actually look like as far as the search. But it seemed to be a bit of a mix. So I don't know. I was really wondering, is there going to be a focus as far as finding someone who fits a much different profile? I said in the short reaction video I put up this afternoon, is it going to be somebody that's much longer in the tooth? Like, is there really going to be an intention to get somebody with some gray hairs? Does that even matter? It could be somebody with not that much experience, but I don't know. They're like different personality wise. Do you think that they're going to like really intentionally try to find a different kind of mold here? Or is that just too early to ask that kind of question?
Boy, and that is a loaded question, and it's I don't want to call it the $1 million question, but I may call it the $750,000 a year question. But because here's all the dynamics at play here with this particular position, and this really is unlike any other position coach on a staff, a football staff. They've got to have, first of all, Joey's going to go with somebody. My guess is that either he or somebody on his staff knows well. Okay, that's typically how this works. You're not going to take a chance on some a younger guy that hasn't done it before. I wouldn't gather because there's too much at stake here. You can't. This was clearly a position that needed some attention in the portal. They threw some assets at it. They brought in 4 portal additions. And you could make the argument, Cowan, that this group will make or break the season next year. That's just how important this is. But, okay, so does this offensive line coach, do they jive with what Zach wants to do on offense? Like, have they ever coached tempo before? What kind of running scheme do they coach from a blocking standpoint? Does it jive with what Taj Brooks' running style is? Do they even have any idea what kind of pieces they have here to work with and what they may be good at versus what they're not good at? One of the things that I remember Joey telling me on one of his last coaches shows is that it was a self-criticism he was like, I've talked to our staff a bunch, and he goes, and one of our own criticisms of ourselves is that we didn't figure out what we were soon enough. And he goes, and that's going to be a goal for the spring and early and fall camp, is let's figure out what we are quicker, like what are we good at? What are we not good at? All those things. And you're going to drop somebody new in here that is going to kind of start from scratch. Then you have like terminology and all the things that all the players kind of already semi know, and then other position coaches know, like Coach Cochran and Coach Johnson, and on it goes. So there's a lot to consider here. It's not, and it makes you feel a bit vulnerable right now, and that it's so vital, and you don't really know who's in charge of it. But you just have to trust the people in charge, that they'll find somebody that they trust that can maybe be an experience upgrade, or do bring some sort of age to the room that would potentially help. There's a lot to consider when you're talking about a position like this.
I know it's a long-term decision, so you certainly don't want to be a prisoner of the moment, but also thinking about maybe the value in finding a really seasoned guy, because of the fact that spring camp is, I don't know, 6 weeks away or something. I mean, it's not only going to be some early enrollees trying to acclimate. There's going to be an offensive line coach trying to acclimate. Maybe it's a little easier for a guy that's seasoned. Maybe it's not. Maybe I'm just, hoping that it would be that way. But, man, a whole lot to consider as we roll through these upcoming weeks, man. Appreciate some bonus time to react to this here this evening. Chris and I will be back in the morning to set the table for Texas Tech and Baylor, of course, as he's on the call there from Waco. So looking forward to it, Chris, and appreciate the time as always.
Cowan, never a dull moment.
That's right.
I mean, it just does not exist. And I thought, oh man, it's kind of quiet. Well, no, it's not. But yeah, we'll try to figure it out together. And I will, before I leave you, I will say this: it's not going to surprise me if something happens fairly quickly, because how long did it take them to replace Emmett Jones last year when something, like when we got that, curveball thrown at us? And I mean, Juice Johnson was in Lubbock within 48 hours and hired, and away we go. So I don't know if we're on a similar timetable here, but it's not going to surprise me a bit if something happens fairly quickly. But I'm not promising that. I'm just saying that's just kind of the what we saw the last time. So again, as we often tell you on these podcasts, man, keep your head on a swivel, keep hope alive. We'll do the best we can. Keep your head up, everybody out there. Don't feel vulnerable, even though I told you that I kind of do. And we'll talk to you next time.
There you go. And make sure you're subscribed on YouTube or anywhere you get podcasts, so you never miss an episode, a reaction episode, or anything in between. And I might as well just remind whoever needs the reminding out there, post your job for free today at linkedin.com/LockedOnCollege. Terms and conditions apply. Chris, appreciate you, man. We'll catch you on the other side. Appreciate you guys for being out there, and hope you'll be back to join us for the next round on Locked On Texas Tech.